Hello, everyone, and welcome to Insights at DD Lynn Designs. I'm here to share with you tips, tricks, and techniques in the ancient art of wire. My goal is always to share knowledge, for we are all learning from each other all the time. So, to get started, one of the things I wanted to share with you today was how to create your own copper ball chain connector. And this is what I am talking about. So one of the things that I've struggled with copper ball chain is the traditional copper ball chain connector. Frankly, I think they're ugly, and honestly, they are so difficult to maneuver and work with. The connector is very small, and in the same token, it is so hard to pull this ball chain out from this little slice here. It's just a real pain in the butt to me. So I've spent the last couple of years searching high and low for different ways to come up with creating my own ball chain connector. I've seen different things out there, but nothing that really seemed to work for me. My first design was the halo design, where I created a loop and I wrapped it around the ball, and then I continued to wrap it around the additional balls in the chain. And that was okay, and it's better than the standard ball chain connector. However, I wanted something better. So today we're going to make a very decorative but really cool and durable ball chain connector. So let's get started. So the first thing I want to talk about is the ball chain that I'm using. This is 2mm ball chain. And what that means to all of us is that we have to use a specific gauge of wire due to the fact that the connecting links between each ball are very small. If it's even 1mm, 1.5. So for this chain, we can't use a gauge any greater than 22. Now, if you have a ball chain that is 4 to 5mm or greater, I think that you could go ahead and use 20 gauge. So today we're going to be starting with 22 gauge wire. And what I'm going to do is I am going to create a loop about 2 inches back from the top of this wire, because we need excess wire to work with. Now, this particular tutorial is really designed for intermediate or advanced. And honestly, I don't know how a beginner could do it, but if you are a beginner and you do this and you've only been wire wrapping for a couple of months, my hat off to you. This is a very fiddly technique. It's going to be patience and trying, but the end result is just really cool and so much nicer, because you can take your clasp now, you can add a lobster clasp, you can create your own clasp, and now you have a ball chain that someone doesn't have to struggle with. You can also add adaptive links to make it longer for someone or shorter, so you don't have to use as much of the ball chain. Anyways, let's get started. So the first thing I'm going to do, as I mentioned, is I'm going to create a loop. And I've already created several of these, so I know that I need about a 2mm loop. And so what I discovered is that my 6-step bell making pliers, the number 1, is the perfect size for me to create this loop. So the first thing I'm going to do is I am going to create the loop by wrapping the wire up and over each other, and I'm going to take the wire here on my right side, and I'm going to wrap it over the top of the left wire, and I'm going to push them back, and I'm going to wrap them up a little bit. Do you see that? Kind of pushing them up. I'm not making a complete second loop, but just enough to wrap it up on each side just a little bit. So here's what we have. Let me get this off here. Okay, doesn't want to come off. And it shouldn't be that tight, but it was for some reason. So here's what we have. So now we're going to take our ball chain, and I am going to be working with this right wire here first, and you're going to put your first bead, and we're going to put it on the back. Now, some of this I'm going to have to hide because this is the fiddly part. I need to hold this ball with my thumb. So in order to do that, I have to hide the loop that it's in. So just so that you can see what we're going to be working with here, I'm going to tuck my thumbnail. You're going to be using your thumbnail a lot over this ball. Oh, it's fiddly, like I told you. You just have to be really patient, and I think I need to open that up just a little bit. So that's what I'm going to do. Get my other pliers here, and I'm just going to open it up a little bit so that I have a little more working room. Okay, so we're going to get our ball and we're going to put it behind. And if you're right-handed, you really want to do it this way. We're going to put it behind, over thumbnail over the bead, and you're going to get your petite-nosed pliers or chain nose. You need something that has a very fine tip, because we're going to grab these two wires right here. I just moved it, so I'm going to need to adjust that again. So this is what I mean by fiddly. I want this wire to rock up a little bit so that it's riding next to the other wire, but not all the way over. And the same thing on this side. And I want them right next to each other. So what we're going to be doing is wrapping around this ball chain and encasing it. So I need to get a hold of this. Like I said, it's fiddly. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to squeeze this up a little bit while I'm holding it in place. And then I'm going to squeeze the back one, the back wire, and then I'm going to come behind this link right here, the link that's in between each ball. I'm going to put my pliers over the top two wraps and behind that link. This is really important. This is your anchor. So see that there? And here. I'm right in there. So I'm going to turn it back around, and I am going to grasp this wire, and what I'm doing is I'm pushing it up and over, and I'm riding on top of that ball. Riding on top of it. I want to trap it in there. See that? So I'm riding on top of the ball, and then I'm going to be pulling the one around the back and riding over it as well. Very slow, small movements. And I'm now close to trapping that ball inside of those wires. So I'm going to push this around a little bit more to trap the top. It is not going to fall out the top now. I'm going to turn it over because I need to trap the back of it. So I'm going to grab these wires again, and I'm going to make sure your ball is pushed down in there. I'm going to bring this wire around and over that bead. Now I'm going to hold it with my thumb. And there's that little link right there. And I'm going to grab this wire from the outside and I'm going to swing it in. Now I need to tighten this right here. So you see where it's still kind of away from the bead? So I'm going to turn this around. I'm going to start straightening everything up. And just very gently, I'm going to hold that down right there and wrap that over that bead. And I'm telling you, it's going to take a little practice unless you are just immediately brilliant at this. So anyways, we now have 3 wraps. Now, depending on where you want your loop to go, meaning this can be your back or this can be your back. I'm going to have this as my front. So I'm going to turn this back around, and my intention now is to wrap this wire, and you want to make sure that you line this up, that it's all lined up really nice. Go around, make little tiny movements, and really check your wire. This is going to be my front, because this is where I'm going to make my connecting loop. I'm going to make a connecting loop right here. Okay? So this is going to be my front, and that ball, as you can see, is encased inside of those wraps, and it's not going to come out. So I'm going to turn it around, and I'm going to grab my wires right here because I need an anchor, and I don't want, do you see that? You don't want to get the ball in there, because if you hit the ball, you'll push the wire out or you'll push the ball out. And I'm going to bring that wire back down. And now I'm going to loop it around this link in between both balls. So, very gently, I'm going to tuck this wire right here at this bend. I'm just going to give it a little snuggie. I'm doing very little tiny movements. Then I'm going to turn my wire back around. And again, I'm going to grab these 3 wires here. Again, that's my anchor. And I'm going to bring that wire, and you want to, don't come out too far here because it's too much distance, which could pull on the rest of the wires. And use your fingers and just tuck it down. Now I've got a little gap here, so I'm going to tuck that down by holding the ball chain. I'm very gently and very slowly tucking this inside. I'll show this to you. I'm going to tuck this inside that little link. So now I'm going to turn it around. I'm going to hold my ball where my wires are looped around, and I'm going to tuck this even in tighter. Very gentle little movements. But I'm really holding down this ball that's got the wire wraps around it because I don't want to pull on my wires. So again, because we're working with such tiny little spaces, I still don't like this gap right there. You see that? So I'm going to tuck it in even more. And I'm just going to simply hold this here and push down tiny, tiny, tiny movements. Because again, I don't want to move my wire. Now it's pulling away right here. So these are perfect examples to show you why we're moving in such small increments. And there's a little gap right here. And I'm going to fix that. So I'm going to hold this here, and I'm going to take my pliers and I'm just going to kind of push her in. Then rock this gently into that link, the link that's between the balls. So I'm going to come back and I'm going to push it down even more because I really want that nice and snug in there because we're locking this in. Now I'm going to do some adjustments, and here's another tip in wire art is do your adjustments as you're going. If you wait until your design is done, you may not be able to get in there. And I still want to tighten that around that ball a little bit more. A lot of fiddling. A lot of fiddling. Okay. I think I like that. Now, this is my front. So you have two options here. One, you can make the decorative design, which I'm going to demonstrate for you. Let me get my hands out of here. Or two, where this is wrapping around and it's up on the front right now, you can cut it off, which means you would swing it around to the back one more time and tuck it in right here. So now I'm going to make some minor adjustments, and I'm going to start tightening this wire around this ball even more. And again, it's just little itty bitty movements. Tiny, tiny. And you're going in the direction of your wire. So I'm just gently pushing around that, and you can see how that ball is not going to come out of there. So for those of you that want to see how to make the decorative part, then just stay tuned because we're going to do that. And for those of you that don't, go ahead. I need to tighten this wire still some more. I don't like that gap right there. I'm really holding that ball down. Go ahead and bring this wire around the back one more time and then tuck it in right here. And tuck it in right there. So now we're going to make our loop. And here's something that's important to know. Because you're likely going to either attach a clasp to this, depending on your end. So I'm going to assume that this is going to be your clasp end. You need to make sure that your loop, so let's say I'm going to connect my clasp to this loop that we're going to make, okay? You want to make sure that your loop is in the same direction, meaning it's going to be a sideways loop versus our standard loops where we normally have our wire straight up and then we bend it back and make the loop. Because you wouldn't be able to get your clasp in it on the other side, meaning when you do another side, you're not going to be able to get my clasp is going to be here like this, and it's going to connect to the other side of my ball chain here. So you want to make sure that your loop is in the same direction as the loop that's around your ball so that you can clasp it in. And if you've pre-made your clasp like I have that are locked in, I can't open them up, I can't open up this loop down here, then you want to make sure that you put your clasp in before you close your loop. So we're now going to make our loop, and I need this to be a sideways loop, meaning the same direction that this one is. So that loop is going to ride right on top of this one. So all I'm going to do is make my loop. And I'm going to give it a little bend down. Even sharper than that. Yeah. Okay, so now we have this. I'm going to get my, wherever they are, my 6-step barrel or loop making pliers, or whatever you call these things. And I'm going to use the smallest, the number 1, because I'm going to be attaching my clasp. And so I don't need a big loop there, and I don't want a lot of pull on it. If you don't want to attach your clasp, then just go ahead and close your loop and you can add a jump ring. So I'm going to go ahead and swing my wire over the plier. Then I'm going to adjust my pliers. Now I'm holding my ball and I am rocking. I'm going to change my position. I normally don't do it this way, you guys, so I'm working in an opposite direction that I'm comfortable with. And I'm going to take this, it's got to go around the front, and sorry, out of frame. God, this is crazy, huh? And rock this until, now I'm going to pull my pliers out so you can see, and I'm going to rock this until it's in line, meaning directly in line from here to here. So I'm going to put my pliers back in just because I want to straighten it up a little bit more. And I was really yanking on that. So just making a couple corrections here. And by the way, if you're going to attach a link or anything, you want to hammer this before you close it off to harden your wire. So at this point, I would be heading out to the garage to hammer at this loop here and harden it. I want it hard and strong. So now, just for the sake of demonstration, I'm going to go ahead and add my clasp because I want this locked in. And I'm just going to slide it through. I might have to open up that wire a little bit. And now I've got my clasp in there. And then I'm going to get my chain nose. You want to make sure they're petite because you don't have a lot of room in here. So big chain nose or anything with a big jaw on the end, or not jaw, point, won't work. Now I'm holding this down, and this bead is totally encased in these wraps. So I'm just going to swing it around and pull it straight down. Then I'm going to turn it around. I'm going to hold my bead again. Then I'm going to let go because, well, actually, you could do it 2 ways. You can hold your bead and pull it, or I'm going to let my pliers do the work for me and make very small, gentle pushes and tucks to push that wire around. And I want to lock it around this wire right here so it doesn't have the chance to move these wires. So now that I feel pretty confident with that, I'm going to turn it back around. Again, I'm going to do my adjusting because I want to make sure that's lining up. Then I'm going to grab my loop and I'm going to grab my wire and I'm going to swing it around again. And then I'm going to cut it off in the back. So now we've completed our handcrafted, handmade, as far as if you wanted to stop here, ball chain connector. And isn't that much nicer than, to me, this dreadful thing? You know now, I don't like these at all. I've never been able to use these very well, and they're just awful to deal with to me. So now I'm going to go ahead and turn this around. I want to make sure it's tucked in good. And I just want to make sure she's really good and tucked in. Nice and tight. Little tiny movements. See, I got probably another 0.55 millimeter of movement in there. And that little ball is stuck in there. She ain't going anywhere. So you have two options here. I would think that some of us would think, well, what if someone pulled on this? Could they pull it apart? Well, anything in wire can be pulled apart. I mean, even people that buy jewelry from jewelry stores where they're prefabbed, you pull on it hard enough, you can pull it apart. I don't have that problem. So if you're concerned and you've already got this cut off on the back, or you've already completed your decorative loop, and it can be a spiral or it can just be a little tiny loop, then you can take this wire right here and you can continue wrapping it on an angle around this piece and then tucking it behind here. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go ahead and cut it off. So to make my life easy, here's another tip. Instead of trying to get my flush cutters or nippers up underneath this, I'm going to hold my wire right here with my thumbnail and I'm going to swing this up so that I have room. But I also find sometimes a lot of length of wire on the end is in my way, and I really want to get up close and personal. And by the way, everyone, these are the best flush cutter snippers I've ever owned. I will put a description or a link down below in the description. I bought these probably a little less than 2 years ago, and I have bought Tronex. I have bought Xuron, and no disrespect to Xuron, but Xuron can't touch these. I don't even use my Xuron anymore because they started crossing over each other right here. These are not only made with very heavy high gauge stainless steel, but they're unbelievably sharp. I've had them for a year and a half. I've even used them on 16 gauge wire, which I don't recommend, but it hasn't eaten in to my blade. And they're so sharp, I have not lost any of the sharpness I can get in the smallest places. So now that I've swung my wire up, I can really get under there, and I'm going to come in on an angle because I don't want that wire flush. I want it kind of shaved off on the top. So I'm going to cut that back. And do you see what I mean? How there's an angle on that right there. So then I'm just going to take my needle nose and I'm just going to very gently start pushing that in. And it actually hides it. So instead of having this stubby little completely flush cut end, you have this, it's like angular. So it hides it a lot better, and no little stickies, no Sharpies. So now we have our clasp attached, which means that based on whether we're making a bracelet or a necklace, or we're going to make whatever you're making with your ball chain, and then now you would just clasp it on to the other side of your ball chain connector that you made by hand. And this loop is bigger than this loop because I want it bigger to get my clasp in. Okay, so again, I would take this out to the garage and I would hammer it because I want it nice and strong and hard. So now we're going to go ahead and make our decorative spiral. And it doesn't have to be a spiral. It can just be a little tiny loop if you want. So what I'm going to do is I'm holding this bead really tight with my hand, and I'm going to swing this over just like I did. And then I'm going to hold the bead down with my thumb. I'm always holding this bead down because I don't want anything to move it. Even though it's in there pretty darn secure, I don't want anything to move it. So I'm going to push just on this wire. And I'm going to bring it up. I'm going to angle it up because remember, I'm going to be making a spiral. So I need the space to make it, first of all. And by the time I'm finishing my spiral, I'll be much closer to center. Now, I'm also going to do a little straightening, and for those of you don't know, you can take your pliers and very easily, in little tiny movements, go up and down the wire and straighten it out. I'm going to be cutting a lot of this off, but I wanted to also let you know it's much easier to straighten your wire if you're using something with a wider jaw, like your chain nose, because you have more material here. So it's going to grasp more of the wire, and having a tiny plier with a very tiny tip, you could actually bend it again, where this actually gives you a lot of security in holding the wire and straightening it. So I'm going to use the widest part of the jaw, and I'm just going to go very gently up and down this wire. Then I'm going to turn it the other way, and I'm going to go back towards center. And you're just working on different angles of the wire to straighten it, because it just makes it easier for us when we're working with very clean, straight lines, when we have a specific design or, element that we want to add to our piece. So I know that I'm going to need about 1.5 centimeters to create this spiral like I did on here, to where it's not too big and it's going to sit center. So I'm going to measure this on my board at 1.5 centimeters, and I'm going to cut it. So I'm cutting all that excess off. So here we have about, oops, I'm all tangled up, 1.5 centimeters. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my very petite nose, round nose, putting all that out of my way. And these are my Tronics. These are flat on the inside of this particular side, and then they're round on this. And here's another thing. Tronics are very expensive, and my tip bent, which I was very upset about. And when I called the distributor, the manufacturer, he said, well, what wire gauges are you using it on? I said, well, I'm using it to make loops between, 22 to 18 gauge. He says, well, you can't use it on 18 gauge. I said, well, that wasn't advertised when I bought it off of Amazon. So we didn't have a very good conversation. And since then, they have updated the description of what gauge wire you can use their tools on. So be very careful when you buy any tools that you read what gauges they're designed for. I was not responsible for this because it was not listed in the description. So my complaint about very high-end pliers, they better put the description in there, right? So anyways, blah, blah, done with whining about that. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this end and I'm going to very gently soften it, because I want the smallest loop, because I'm going to close that loop. I want it really tight and close together. And listen, Tronics makes really good tools. I'm not knocking that they don't make good tools. It's just, they're very expensive, and many of my very inexpensive tools do just equally great a job. So I'm trying to close that as much as possible. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to spiral this in, and I'm going to get my chain nose to do that. And I'm going to hold my piece very firmly, and I am going to, as I am turning this closed loop into the wire here, I'm also pushing my wire in at the same time. So it's actually a push-push maneuver. So together. So I'm not struggling with it. When I first started out in this beautiful ancient art of wire, it dates back before the Phoenicians. I've studied a lot of history about it. Anyways, I didn't know. I was watching someone doing a tutorial and making a spiral swirl, and I was just cranking down on this. So tips tricks and techniques are everything in accelerating our journey in this ancient art. So I'm just slowly making my little movements. And I'm holding on to that wire, and I'm also making sure that I'm supporting my beads. Now I need to create a little gap here, because see how close this is to this bead? Because I need to come up and over it. So I'm going to lift this up just very gently. I got my thumbnail down here underneath that first wire. Give her a little lift up. Do you see the gap that I've created now? And then I'm going to swing as I'm doing the last roll on this, and I'm pulling up a little bit so that I have room to bring this around and up and over that bead. And you got to have a little strength here, folks, because you're working in a very small space. And then I'm going to go ahead and check as I'm rolling it back to see if it's centered. So that's pretty good. I'm going to push it back to the left a little bit. So all I'm going to do here is just grab this and very gently, oops, that happens. Total fix. Very gently rock it back and down just a little bit. So let's take a look. I like that. So here's another tip, trick, and technique. I'm not afraid to sand, file, and buff my wire. I go for it. And to create a flattened look as if we've literally hammered or flattened our wire. And also as we're gripping down, it's inevitable we're going to get some nicks. So I'm going to take my nail file, and this is a 180-100, and I am just going to file on top and just smooth out that spiral. And it's also going to give a really unique brush look to the copper. And you're going to think that this piece of wire that was turned into a spiral was hammered. And I'll show you what I mean here in a minute. So, a lot of people say, oh my gosh, you're scratching it. Yep, and it makes beautiful highlights and lowlights when you oxidize it and gives it a different textured look. So, this is what we're talking about. Now, if you don't like the brush look, then just come back in with the really fine side of the fine gridded side of your file, and just go ahead and go over that again and just shine her up. And there you have it. And now I'm just going to go ahead and check, make sure everything's good. And I need to square this up. And it looks like, this is the first time this has happened today, because I've made a bunch of these today for some custom necklace change. This loosened up a little bit in here. And this is what I mean by having to hold on to everything. So I am just probably when I lifted this wire up, but it's not going to fall out, folks. There's no way this can fall out. And here's what I mean by that. This ball right here is locked in with this wire that we wrapped around it. So don't even worry about it. And even in the back, it cannot come out unless somebody really gave it, you know, a gorilla tug. So I'm just going to do some gentle little tightening up and making sure everything is lined up. And there we have created, looks like I need to straighten this up a little bit here. So I'm really holding on to this and just gently rocking that loop up. And there we have made our own handcrafted ball chain connector. I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial, everyone. I'm new at doing videos, and so there's a lot of bleeps and the difficulty of trying to stay inside the frame of the camera lens. So my hat off to all those wire artists out there that have been doing this for a long time and do not only a phenomenal job, but are so gracious of offering their tutorials for free. So we really need to be grateful to all these people because they don't have to do that. They don't have to spend their time in their day taking hours to create tutorials and editing them and showing you how to make something. So this is a really unique community. And I am just in such awe and respect of all the wire artists out there because we're learning from each other all the time. So please, if you have any comments or you would like to see me do a full tutorial of a specific design or any feedback, please hit the subscribe button down there and let me know your comments and thoughts. And always remember, everyone, be kind. We live in a world where that goes a million miles. Thank you so, so much for watching. Thank you for being a part of this wonderful ancient art of wire, and have a fabulous, magical, wonderful day. Bye for now.